Hail and well met. I am your humble scribe Amanda, here inviting you to join me in a quest of daring do as we create a new campaign setting. I'm trying to shorten these intros. First off the bat, this is going to be recorded in a slightly different way. I'm having to record the different aspects of it separately because, I don't know, something's going wrong with my computer. I don't know what it is. I need to figure it out. It's one of the reasons why there's been basically no game footage, because my computer is not recording stuff properly. Maybe time for me to invest in new motherboard and what have you, but we'll see. What are we doing today? Today, we are doing map making. At least we're doing the first stage of map making, which is what is the outline of these land masses and how do they relate to each other within the greater area, the larger map. And we're going to be showing, I'm basically going to be showing you today how, when I want to do a map in a hurry, the way I do it. If I'm taking my time, I will just create a map whole cloth with no outside influences. But if I'm in a hurry, Google Maps is your friend, and then a little bit of imagination. So for this, I'm going to be using Paint.net. I'm going to be using ArtRage 4, and yeah. So because I'm having to record all this stuff separately, I am now going to pass you over to future Amanda, who will explain everything. And see you again in a few minutes. Thank you, past Amanda. So, okay, what are we doing here? Basically, what I do is I go to Google Maps and I pick an island, I pick an area that I like, and I use its screenshot tool. And here, obviously, I kind of screw up and have to go back. But it's a good way of getting a map template very quickly. And let's face it, Earth is covered in islands, and many of them have really interesting shapes. So you can pick it, you can find an island to suit just about any shape, to be quite honest. Next we move on to Paint.net, and as you can see, I have got some work done already. I kind of half did this ahead of time. So this is the island of Gyaros from the Mediterranean, and we're going to copy and paste it into, in a moment, into a base map. And this is based off of a combination of Santorini and Lesbos. And you'll notice that they're not quite the same, and that's because I've cut pieces out and moved them. I've also kind of reshaped them a little bit so that they fit what I want them to look like just a little bit better, and then I export them as a PNG file. These then are dropped into ArtRage 4 and brought into a layer. Now, these are only going to be used as, I suppose inspiration is probably a good word. They're not exactly going to be used as a template. They're very much going to be used as a, well, this is a rough idea of what I want. Now let's make it into what I actually want. And the best way I've found for doing this personally is to literally just trace to layer. Like this. Lots and lots of tracing. And I'm not aiming for accuracy. Like I said, I'm using these as kind of a rough outline, but I'm altering it so that I get the land masses and the shapes that I want, and potential locations for coastal cities, coastal towns, and friction points between cultures. I do try and keep in mind, to a degree, the nature of kind of the waters surrounding it. So like in between these land masses, you're going to have a Mediterranean type area where the water is going to be much, much calmer. So you're not going to get the same kind of extremely jagged erosion. I say this while doing an island with extremely jagged erosion, but you'll see why in a minute. So I try to keep that in mind. I'm also trying to keep in mind that I want to have multiple large-ish islands for various reasons, most of them plot-driven. And it's good to have kind of options and a bit of flexibility in what you intend your game world to look like and what your game world will physically be. Because by doing that, you end up with a slightly more believable world, I think. But I'm kind of biased. You know, it's my project. Of course I think that way. Now, here you'll see that I kind of go way off script on this. And this is actually me partially using internal divisions on the island of Lesbos as inspiration. So I'm using a road system a little bit and cutting in because I want this island to be kind of bisected by this very narrow channel between the North and the South Island. This is to serve as a friction point because it's an area where you're going to have potentially a lot of battles and a lot of aggro between the two ends of the island, and it's going to create its own particular culture, one where people feel kind of on their own. At the bottom here, the peninsula, I'm turning into a island, and I'm doing that because it's a large chunk of land. I mean, it's probably about the size of Great Britain, so it's a useful place to be able to say, you're running a campaign and you go, and heroes, you are to go to the island of, and you are to. It gives you a separate area where they're not going to be able to rely on the fact that they're locals for anything. Next, I start copying and pasting each aspect to its own layer, badly. And the reason I'm doing this is it gives me the ability to manipulate these and slide them around until everything is in the position and the shape I really want it to be in. My computer also has a little shit fit when I'm trying to do this. As you can see, I actually had to cut there, and yeah, it was fun. So, and another little shit fit there. Yeah, I really need to do some work on this computer, and I don't know how to fix it, but anyway. So, god damn it, yeah, this happened over and over and over, and in the end I just went really fast and hoped. And it did eventually work. So, with this particular island, I end up flipping it vertically. And people will go, it kind of looks like Great Britain, and actually that's accidental. I kind of flip it because it looked okay that way, but it didn't look the way I wanted it to. You'll see me flip it in a minute, as far as I can remember. Okay, so that's cut and paste, and then I resize and rotate this until it's where I kind of want it to be. So there isn't a bad place for it. Then I'm trying to remember what order I did this in. Then I go back to this, and this is when I start deleting things by accident. And the undo button is my best friend. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, I wasn't 100% happy with the positioning of this. Of course, it helps if you're on the right layer. Did I ever mention I'm not exactly an expert at this? Anyway, so I rotate it, and I'm not exactly happy with it at this point. And like, it looks okay, but it doesn't look the way I want it to look. So I ended up rotating it and dropping it into paste like that. And actually, that's the position more or less I ended up leaving it in, because I really liked that. It just worked. It looked kind of right, and it kind of gave the look and the feel of the area that I wanted it to have. And then merged layer down as I began to feel that things were semi-finished. Next, we took the island of Gyaros and we brought it. Well, I was thinking about having it on that side, but then I decided to go on the other side of the map. This island is actually a story device. It's a kind of a plot device for the origin myth of the world, and it gets changed a little bit. But yeah, this is the thing about, especially map mapping for me. It's a very organic thing, because I will change things constantly. Like here, I'm basically adding a bite into the island so that it has a choke point, a place where powers might meet and fight, but also to give it a bit more of a feeling of, I suppose roughness might be a word for it, or coarseness. Because if you look at maps, real world maps, they're not regular, they're not organized, they are coarse and they are difficult, and they're kind of like sand. They're coarse and gets everywhere, but not really. I'm saying a lot today. My apologies. So that's merged down, and we're still not finished because I wasn't happy with this. So I ended up cutting this out, and the This is where you start using the copy-paste functions in a big way by rotating and moving things around, and I didn't realize for a while that I cut the end off one of the islands. Yeah, that was a pain. But again, this is about creating a choke point, but it's also about creating kind of a larger inland sea. I wanted the Mediterranean area to be kind of a bit more, I suppose, kind of open, I suppose. And I also wanted the western large bay to be, sorry, the eastern large bay to be that bit more closed in, so that it's kind of its own thing in a way. This island then gets dropped in, and I kind of tried to match up the topography a little bit. Not to a huge degree, but just a little bit, so it kind of looks like it fits the jigsaw puzzle thing that you see with most, when you look at any map of Earth, the kind of way that things look like they go together. Then this island, and you can see one of the reasons why I shaped that bite into the Western island the way I did, it kind of just fits. It kind of looks like it once fitted in there. And I start scrapping things. I start merging all the layers. And I delete this. And then I realize I've chopped the arse off of the southern island. And then Control X becomes Control X? Control Z becomes my friend as I undo everything. But because I've already done this once, it kind of goes a hell of a lot faster the second time. So this is the most basic, bare bones aspect of map making for me. This is what the islands look like from a distance if you draw them with a pen. There's no mountains, there's no rivers, there's no lakes, there's no borders. It's literally, this is the outline. And it gives me a fairly good sense of where the world is, what the world is, how it looks. So in my head, I've got a better way of I have a better way of telling the story, because I know that like the eastern continent, the northern section of it has this narrow choke point. So perhaps there was centuries of war before it was unified, or perhaps there's still ongoing centuries of war. That on the extreme northern aspect of the western island, perhaps that top part with this narrow little bite is something like Cornwall. It's its own duchy, or perhaps part of it is kind of like Alaska. It's this chunk of another country, this chunk of the same country on that's not connected directly. There's lots of different ways to use this, and by using it this way, it just works for me. Here I'm trying to put in a notation for myself of where I want a archipelago of islands to go, and in the end I basically just go with two lines, which is there's a handful of islands going down south, and then that's the rough line of the islands going across the inland sea. And that's kind of it. So I'm now going to pass you over to future Amanda, and she'll kind of expand on this. And yeah, anyway, bye. Hi. Okay, so thank you, future Amanda. This is of course future Amanda. So I kind of want to just go over a couple basic aspects of this and why I've done things the way I've done them. So I'm going to switch over to this, and we're going to switch over to something nice and contrasty. Okay, so this, and this are essentially their choke points, and they're kind of important in that they will inform to a degree the military interactions between here and here, here and here, and here and here. So it's quite possible that you would have independent states in each of these areas. Very possible, because you have this choke point. And before you say, oh, of course, but they could use Marines, they could send in the Marines. They could send in the Marines. However, it's not that simple. Naval invasions are difficult. They have always been difficult, and they will always be difficult. By its nature, the sea is treacherous, and it will chew you up and spit you out given an opportunity. So while, yes, this and this, very plausible for a naval invasion, you're far more likely to want to go this way, or even better yet, invade this by crossing here or here. So this creates friction points between different cultures and races. So, for example, say this island here is an independent state, an independent kingdom of its own. It's really going to be looking to defend itself here and here, because these are the two closest points to the larger landmasses. So what does that mean? That means odds are you're going to have some kind of fortifications here. You're probably going to have fortifications along these coasts entirely, while these are not nearly as heavily defended. And depending on its relationship to this and this landmass, it could be an incredibly paranoid kingdom. Think, God, you could almost think like North Korea, which is quite apt at the moment. That kind of hermit kingdom mentality. On the other hand, if it's very friendly and amicable, this could be a very forward-looking, outward-looking nation. Think Ireland. So this, well, I like to think of these areas in larger land masses as kind of the Megiddo regions. Megiddo is probably is a place in the Middle East which is probably the inspiration for the word Armageddon. And it was basically a crossroads for various trading routes and different kingdoms. In ancient antiquity, we're talking pre-Roman even. And it's a piece of land that was fought over again and again and again and again, which very much makes it a fulcrum in history. And that's what this region, or this region, or this region, or well, those really would very much be as a fulcrum in history. They would be points where the futures and influence of kingdoms completely changes overnight, because this place invades here, this place invades there, and it's here that they end up fighting again and again and again, because here is the Narrows. This is the point where you can potentially build something like Hadrian's Wall as a defensive position. It's also a region where you would end up with a situation where the two different areas would probably have a lot of intermixing. Like 6 out of 7 days you'll have smugglers go. If these are two independent kingdoms, so let's say this is Kingdom A and this is Kingdom B. So say Kingdom A and Kingdom B are currently not at war, but they're frequently at war. Well, along here is going to be a lot of fortresses probably on both sides, plenty of patrols, but a fuck ton of smugglers. It's going to be the normality there more than likely. And besides that, you're also going to have intermarrying, because in this region, even if this is like an ethno-state, for the lack of a better word, where it's essentially only one species is allowed here, yeah, that is theoretically possible, but it's not likely. Because in all likelihood, you're going to have a certain number of people of this race, race A, intermingling with race B, at the very least on the border areas. So there's that. Next thing is, why did I design it this way? Well, I very much wanted a Mediterranean system here, where you have very calm waters, shallow waters, where quick shallow draft vessels are the norm, where a chain of islands joins across here. Now you're going to say, why don't they just trade this way? Or, here, where it's shorter. That does make sense to a degree, but that relies on this being one single power. So, for example, if this is a power on its own, say this is power, oh god, I'm running out of colors. This is power D. And that's E. So, say B wants to trade with E, but they're not in friendly terms with D. They're not going to be able to cross over here and then overland to E. They're going to want to have a more direct route that doesn't get taxed to hell and back by D. So this is why having an archipelago here, it would be quite interesting, because you will end up with a situation where the different sides are always vying for control of these islands. And if island nations of our world are anything to go by, in all likelihood, they're not going to be too happy about it. They're going to want their independence. And that adds all sorts of complexities in its own right. Now, the other reason I did this way is this is deep water. This is deep ocean all around here. And, basically all of this, well, no, not there. That would be relatively shallow as well, more than likely. But, all of this is all deep water. This is blue water. And blue water is rough water. Think the Atlantic, think the Pacific, where, yes, you can have extremely calm periods and calm areas, but you're just as likely to end up with hurricanes, typhoons, all sorts of really, really brutal weather, which means a completely different style of ship, a completely different form of seamanship, a different seafaring culture for that matter. And it also is a case of this would almost be seen as, by some people, lunatic to go out there, and by other people seen as a challenge. All of it depending on the nature of the race themselves and their culture and the individuals for that matter. Now, as for the actual shapes of whether these inlets, what have you, one of the things I was trying to bear in mind while I was doing this, and as you saw, I did it very quickly and quite roughly, and I will be down the road refining this. But one of the things I was trying to keep in mind is that you're going to want anchorages, you're going to want ports, but just having an inlet isn't enough of a reason to have a port. You need multiple things to have a port city or even a port town. You need a source of water, you need a reliable source of food, you need a reliable source of fuel, and you need a reason to be there. Now, obviously you have these huge bays. They're far too big to, these would be, this one in particular would probably about the size of Ireland. So you're not going to have a port city that covers all of this. It's just not going to happen. But having all these little inlets here, and these will get a lot more detail in the future, kind of going for the fjords in Scandinavia, that kind of feel. Over here, however, this area here, if we can zoom, if I can get my zoom tool for that matter. So like this area here, all of this, potentially, yeah, you could potentially have a city that's there. Not necessarily that big. It would probably only be like tiny, like it would probably be that, if even that. Think something like medieval London. So you're talking about large, but not that large. There's reasons for them to be there. And not only that, but you're also going to have to think about borders. So say this border between B and A, you're probably not going to have a port city here. You're just not, because that's crazy. It's going to be captured and handed off and captured and handed off and recaptured, and you're going to probably push it back and back. And this side, A would have a much greater advantage in that respect. Now, finally, these little land masses. One of the things I want to do is have the different races having multiple kingdoms. Because bear in mind, while this is only a small part of a much larger world, it's still a huge space. This is the size of, like, Madagascar. That just this part here is the landmass of Madagascar. This would be comparable. This is probably about the size of Great Britain. That's probably not far behind it. Same. And even the medium, the small, much smaller islands will probably be about half the size of Ireland, and then downward. So you're not talking about small places. You're talking about quite large places with potential to have their own. Trying to think of the word. Having their own subcultures, their own kingdoms, their own nobilities. You might even come across one that is experimenting in some form of democracy. And this one in particular, I kind of want this one in particular to be a melting pot. This is almost like an affront to here, because here all three races live, and all three races mingle, and all three races spend their lives together, working together towards a common good and a common goal. And this, for me, is going to be almost an affront, certainly to this kingdom, possibly to the others. I want it to be... I can't even think of a real world equivalent. I mean, in a way, kind of Great Britain during the Elizabethan era, maybe, but not exactly, because it's really quite difficult to explain this using real world terms, because this is a huge place, but it has access to it has easy access to the inland sea through these straits. But most of it has access to deep water, to the wide ocean. And that's going to really inform its culture, and it's something to bear in mind, and it's one of the reasons why I went the route I went. But yeah, I guess I'm going to kind of leave it there for today. Next, it's the origin myth. I don't have a choice at this point. I need to move on to the origin myth. So, yeah, that's going to be a thing. So yeah, anyway, this is just the first stage of mapping. There will be more in the future, and we will be going into detail, including things like mountain ranges and how mountain ranges affect water tables, locations for raw materials, forests, what forms the forests might take. There's so much we're going to have to cover with this, because, like I've said from the beginning, this is the last campaign setting I intend to build, and it's the one I intend to run for the rest of my tabletop gaming career. So I want to do this right. And are there many of you watching this? No, but that doesn't matter. I'm still doing it. So I will be back very soon with the origin myth, because it's time. It is time to tell the story of this world. And in the meantime, have a great weekend. Be good. And bye for now.